the backbone of America.
Welcome to the Backbone of America, where we have economical and business discussions with not only entrepreneurs, but influential business leaders. Today, we're here with Jesús Tundidor.
Yes, sir.
Jesús, thank you for coming here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Why don't you provide a little introduction about yourself, what you do for the city of Hialeah, what you hope to accomplish?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to do these types of interviews with great folks like yourself. The city of Hialeah, for a long time, has been a hardworking, blue-collar community, right? It's a place where many individuals have come from other parts of the world and have created and set their roots in this place that we call Hialeah to be able to give future generations like mine, right, the opportunity to achieve their goals and their dreams. And it's a beautiful story of our city. But like everything, right, like every other city, Hialeah is changing, right? It's changing the same way Miami's changing, the same way Doral's changing. And it's important to be able to have the right team, the right government in place to keep up with that change, right? And so by change, and I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it a little later, we're seeing a change in residential communities, we're seeing a change in businesses, in industries, and so all of those things are very important. Now, I got elected in 2019, but I've been in politics for a long time. And once we were elected in 2019, I said, you know what? The moment I get in, I cannot stop working. And so we've passed many initiatives that have helped not just our community, our residents, but also the business sector as well. And so at this moment, funny enough, next week we have our council meeting, and we're going to be passing another big policy of mine that has to do with affordable housing. And so we hope to get it passed in first reading, and then we'll get it again in the first meeting of May. In second reading, and hopefully it becomes successful as well. But it's something great, not just for our community with affordable housing, but also a lot of incentives for the private sector as well. So a lot of good things that we're working on. We're very excited, and I can't wait to share it with you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd like to read something here, maybe as an intro to the video, because Hialeah is such an interesting place, but I'll just read it. It says, the relationship between the Cuban people and the American people is uniquely codified in the law of this land. It's very unique. It's particularly through the Cuban Adjustment Act of 1966 and the Libertad Act of 1995. Hialeah stands as one of the clearest expressions of America's generosity towards the Cuban exile. A city born from that bond, today Hialeah remains a living remnant of the authentic Cuban freedom, the capital of free Cubans around the world. It is a patrimonial treasure that deserves to be protected and respected as it is. Let's get started. Before 1959, Cuba was one of the most entrepreneurial nations on the Western Hemisphere, often leading in Latin America for key economic and social metrics. Do you believe that spirit of entrepreneurialism continues in the Cuban people today? And if so, could you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, so absolutely. I also sit on the board of the Cuban Museum here in Miami. And so it's funny enough, those metrics that you were talking about, we have in a wall in the museum that talk about the many successes that Cuba had pre-revolution. And so I'm great that you brought that up. I can tell you this. The Cuban people are one of the most innovative people I have ever met. I mean, from understanding some of the ways that they've cultivated ideas to come from Cuba to Florida, right, have been amazing, right? They create a car out of a boat and they use different parts to make it run. And so that type of innovation is something that is very rare. But again, my Cuban people, right, are very prone to it. And again, you have seen places not just like Hialeah, but Miami become what it is today because of that Cuban foundation, right? When you started to see the immigration, right, from folks leaving the island, crossing the Florida Straits to make it to this country, to make it to this state, you started to see a change in everything. Hialeah in particular became an enclave of Cubans, right? And within that enclave, they started to create and generate their own workforce, right? So Hialeah for a long time was very big in industrial, right? Manufacturing. You don't see that today because of the laws that are in place and competing with China. But Hialeah was a powerhouse when it came to that industry. The majority of workers in these warehouses were Cuban born. These were individuals that came here. A lot of them were professionals, they were doctors, they were businessmen, whatever the case is, but they came here looking for a way out and they did whatever was needed in order to provide for their family. And so again, because of that influx of Cubans coming from the island to Hialeah, we became an amazing powerhouse in the industry, in industrial manufacturing. From that alone, you started to see folks then going to Miami, where then you have La Pequeña Habana also create. And something that was very, very telling, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or the folks that are watching, during that time frame when the Cuban enclave started to create here in Miami, there were such things as character loans, right? So you had certain banks, right, that wanted a loan, and they wanted to capitalize on the Cuban market. But what happens is that a lot of the folks that came from Cuba, they left everything behind, right? There was no paperwork, there was no nothing. And so what started happening was that these banks started hiring certain Cuban-born individuals that knew the businessmen that were coming to this state, to this county from Cuba. And so since they didn't have any collateral, right, all they based off the loan was their character. Oh, this man Bruno in Cuba owned 3 businesses that were very, very successful. I vouch for him. And those individuals that received those loans paid back their debt 100% in a record time. And so that shows you, right? It shows you that that entrepreneurial spirit from Cuba came here, right? And then once they came here, they turned Miami to what it is today. So I'm very proud of Hialeah. You know, unfortunately, Hialeah gets made fun of, right? Occasionally, a couple of jokes here and there. But I say it very proudly, and I say it with all the respect in the world, that without Hialeah, Miami-Dade County wouldn't be what it is today. So
Yeah. And then, going to my next question, but before that, you mentioned Little Havana. What's the connection? I guess I'm surprised that I didn't think of it earlier, but Little Havana is, also known for Cuba, but it's not inside of Hialeah. Is there any kind of connection where there are different families that went to different places, or?
It was a group of individuals that would always hang out in that area, right? So you have the famous Domino Park, right? That's right on 8th Street. It's across the street from a great restaurant and place called Cuba Ocho, and so it became more of a hangout, and then little by little they started doing different marketing gimmicks, right? To I guess create some sort of environment and market it and brand. Hialeah, though, today is, and for a long time, is the place and the only city that has the number of Cuban Americans that it has today greater than any other place in the world, aside from Cuba. And that's a fact. So again, maybe Hialeah needs a rebranding as well, but as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Hialeah is a blue collar.
That's right.
A lot of blue collar workers. I know a lot of influential individuals did not go to Hialeah. They went to Coral Gables. They may have gone to that Little Havana area. The Freedom Tower also a little bit in that Brickell area. But
that's right.
So diversified. So when I think of Cubans, I think of their expertise in hotels, resorts, entertainment, casinos. And I can't help but think that Miami became that. It became a entertainment hub, especially in the recent years. How big of a role did the Cubans play in that? And do they still hold key roles in those industries?
I think it's safe to say that for a long time, Cubans, they played a major role in hospitality, right? And within hospitality, you can consider all those different items that you had mentioned. I think, though, that today, what you see a lot now is greater than just Cubans, right? Like there's a lot of folks from South America that have also come to Miami-Dade County, and so that that mindset that just Cubans were the ones that dominate today the hospitality industry, I think it's kind of diluted, right? And it's become more diversified. But you go to any Cuban household and the hospitality there is amazing, right? Start off with some cafecito and then it ends with, you never know, un arroz con frijoles negro. And so, the thing is that our people, I think at the end of the day, are very social, right? And that's why we've seen that success and thrive in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, social and outgoing, absolutely. Yeah. Given the high density of Cubans in Hialeah, some view the mayor and its elected officials, as yourself, as the closest thing that Cubans have to a self-governing body in exile. As an elected official in a city largely inhabited by Cubans, what added responsibility comes along with that? I know there's individuals that hope that Cuba would be free one day. Do they have individuals that have like one foot here in in the U.S. and then another one just hoping to come back as soon. I know when Obama almost opened not long ago, there was a lot of investment in Cuba, but it's regressed, with Trump. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I think Obama's policies were extremely wrong when it comes to the Cuban exile community here in Miami-Dade County. But I can tell you this: there's a saying in Spanish, right, that we use in Hialeah a lot, and I'll translate it into English as well. But lo que pasa en Cuba se siente en Hialeah, right? So what happens in Cuba, we feel it in Hialeah, right? Because of that density of Cubans in our community. Someone is always related to someone in the island. So when something very tragic happens on the island of Cuba, the pain and suffering is felt here, right? And so I can tell you that as an elected official for the city of Hialeah that has a very strong and growing population of Cuban-Americans, when I govern and when I lead, you are right, and I think where you were going with that question, it's not only about making sure that the garbage is picked up or that the streets are paved, right? It's also being very aware, right, of the sentiment, right, that our people have with regards to the Cuban government, right? I have to make a statement whenever the Cuban government does something horrendous, right, and that the world knows. I have to speak about it, even though it's not my role as a council member, because my role as a council member is very simple, very clear, right? It's making sure that I vote on legislation and that I pass a budget, right? That is my main function as a council member. But I have to be cognizant of what happens in the island of Cuba because of the fabric of our community.
So how much of Hialeah would go back to Cuba should Hialeah be free?
So I think that sentiment has slowly died out, right? In the beginning, the folks that were coming to this community, the folks that were coming to Hialeah, they always had that mindset. Many of them have spent years, I'm talking about 20, 30, 40 years in this country and never became a citizen because of that mindset, right? That thought, that hope that one day they'd be able to go back to a free Cuba. But then the truth is it never happened, right? Cuba never became free. So either many of those individuals have unfortunately, right, passed away, or they knew that it was a hope not worth pursuing, right? And so today, you ask anyone, and the sentiment is that Cuba will never be free unless something drastic happens within the island, right? And so you do have now people that come here to this country from Cuba, this newer generation, right? That is not the same as the older generation that came here in the 60s. You have folks that are coming in now with a sense of, in my opinion, a little more entitlement, right? And they want certain programs and they want certain benefits. And then those are the first ones that are going back to the island, right? With those benefits that they got from this country. When you have an influx, okay, of individuals that come into a community that are not paying their fair share, right? It puts a strain on government services. It puts a strain on government infrastructure, right? Now, a house, a single family home that's supposed to be housing maybe 4 or 5 people, that's the water and sewer infrastructure, that's the solid waste infrastructure. You fill it up with 10 people now. Now you have double the amount of people living in that house, putting additional pressure on our infrastructure. Eventually something's going to go wrong, but we will never know about it, right? So again, it has its pros and its cons, and I don't want to veer off too much on immigration, but I do feel that you might have nowadays, the newer generation, 1 foot here, 1 foot there, but not the way that the older generation had it, right? It's more that they come here, they get the benefits, and they go back home to utilize it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of individuals that go over there for vacation. So tell me about the inflows and outflows, not only of capital, but of individuals. Are people still coming here to the U.S., and is capital still, is there still a lot of remittances that are going back? I know there was a cut from, or I think there was supposed to be a cut from Trump saying we no longer want that. They're taking advantage of the people. We send $1 and the people really get 30 cents, of the money. Give us a little bit of something we could learn from you on that.
Yeah, we've been very vigilant on that. There are many stores and businesses throughout Miami-Dade County that end up sending gifts or clothes or any types of items back to the island of Cuba. We've been very vocal against that, just because we have seen, right, scenarios where a lot of those businesses have some sort of relationship with the Castro regime, and that's obviously something that we are not in favor of, right? We strongly oppose everything having to do with the Castro regime and the Cuba that we have today. So again, we've seen that now. The latest has been that one of our congressmen, a Congressman Carlos Jimenez, he was a former mayor of Miami-Dade County. He sent a letter to President Trump urging him to end all travel and all deliveries of items to the island. I'm not sure if that's taken place yet, but again, it's another method, it's another approach to add on to the crumbling government of what is Cuba today, right? So we have to keep an eye out, see how that goes.
Wow, so a very hard line. How many businesses, though, in Hialeah depend on the transport and shipping of goods, and then obviously remittances. Obviously, how many? But that's none of our business. I mean, would you say that that's a big industry in Hialeah as far as transport?
I would say it's that type of industry has a presence throughout Miami-Dade County, right? Not just limited to Hialeah. In Hialeah, you will see some as well, but it's not the dominating industry.
Understood. All right, let me start with this one. So Hialeah is a vivid example of raw grassroots entrepreneurship, a city built by hustle and grit and resilience. What specific policies has the city implemented in recent years to promote entrepreneurship and to attract investment? And if you can, be as specific as possible.
Yeah. So, one of the issues that we're seeing throughout Miami-Dade County, possibly even throughout the country, is a housing crisis, right? And so property value has gone up. I don't know about you, but my homeowner's insurance has tripled, and the cost of goods continues to go up. So I fear that the American dream, right, was always, you get older, you get a job, you work, you get married, and you buy a house. That part of the American dream, I feel, for younger generations, right, for our kids, if we continue on the track that we're on today, won't be attainable, right? Especially with the Miami market, right? We've seen the interest rates go up, and logically you would think when interest rates go up, buying goes down. But because of international investment, because of other folks coming from different states continuing to come to Miami, that logic doesn't exist. You continue to see purchases go up, even though interest rates are high. So I feel that one of the things that I've been able to push and sponsor is actually creating an ordinance that focuses on affordable housing. Okay, so I'll give you some detail. I don't want to bore us with it, but right now at this moment, the highest density that we allow in Hialeah is 70 units per acre. Okay, that type of zoning you can use anywhere throughout the city pretty much. You have a TOD, which is our transit-oriented development district, that allows for 125 units per acre, but that zoning is only specific to where you have mass transit, right? Now, I wanted to create something in the middle, so my ordinance allows for 100 units per acre, right? But it requires 15% of those units to be at an affordable rent. So in other words, Bruno comes and he has an acre of land. You tell me that you want to do 100 units per acre because you want to use this new ordinance. Well, the city is going to require you then 15 of those units, which is 15%, have to be at what we consider a 60% AMI, 60% of the area median income. So that chart tells you for a 1-1 at 60% AMI, it's about $1,300 a month. It's hard to find that today. You don't find $1,300 a month, right, for a 1-1 in Miami-Dade County. But that would be the trade-off. Now, developers like it because you're increasing density. And in addition to the increase of density, you're also providing a reduction in parking requirements, because parking is a big deal because it eats up real estate, right? So you have less parking and you have more density, right? That's a great formula for any developer. Now, the hard part is making sure that affordable rent is sustainable long term, right? If the numbers don't work for you, right, then you're probably not going to go for that deal, right? But normally, if you do something like that, either you own the land or you got a great deal on it, or you go look for subsidies. However, in addition to this ordinance that we're creating, simultaneously, we're also creating a housing trust fund. Now, Bruno tells me, hey, I don't want to, or I can't afford to have these 15 units at this rent that you're requiring. What's the alternative? Well, we have a payment in lieu of. All right. So in other words, if you don't want to have these 15 units at an affordable rent, which is in our case 60% AMI, you can pay into the fund for each one of those units. Okay. So when you pay one-time fee for into the housing fund, those units could be market for you. Now, what do we do with the housing fund? We create a program, right? And it's in essence, it's a subsidy program. So let's say my assistant Claudia tells me, hey, I want to rent at that new apartment building, right? That costs $2,000 a month, but I could only afford $1,300. Well, then part of this program is we will subsidize the balance, right? And in other words, we'd subsidize $700 a month for up to 3 years to allow you or allow that person to be able to live in that apartment building.
Who's paying for that subsidy?
The developer.
The developer, and they're paying for 3 years.
The developer pays a one-time fee for the payment in lieu of.
Right.
They pay into this fund, and this fund is used that way.
Okay. If they didn't have to consider that $1,300, where's the market price? $2,000?
Market today, we have to look at it. I would say for a 1-1, possibly maybe $2,200, $2,300 a month. Yeah.
It's expensive, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. And for Hialeah standards, I'm telling you, it's unfortunately we've and this is just how the market goes, right? But unfortunately, we've had plenty of calls, elderly folks, Bruno, that really break my heart. 85 years old, right, telling me that they lived in the same apartment building, in the same apartment unit for 30 years, and now they can't afford the rent, so where do they go? It's a reality, right? And I understand that my ordinance is not going to solve the issue, but if there's anything that we can do to make it a little better, then that's why we're here, right? To find some sort of relief to the folks that need it most.
Now, for these prices that are increasing for individuals in Hialeah, what do? I mean, are they forced to leave the area?
You know, at the end of the day, it's a private building, right? It's private property. If you own a building right now with 30 units on there, and you decide next year to increase rent, that's what it is. If the market calls for that, then you're going to have people flocking to your new price. But it's a reality. Hialeah has always been affordable compared to the rest of Miami-Dade County. Hialeah has always been affordable. Now, this is the reason why we're seeing a huge increase, right, in property value, because developers are starting to see that prices in Doral are at its peak, prices in Miami are at its peak. Well, let's go to Hialeah, right? And so it rises with the market. That's what we're seeing.
You know, I've heard a lot of people are coming from other states for years now since the pandemic, but then recently I've also heard that Miami's population is shrinking because there's people leaving. Yeah. So it's kind of strange. You hear a lot of people are flocking here, but the city's kind of it's getting smaller. What do you see in the city of Hialeah? Has the population grown or shrunk in the last, let's say, 2-3 years?
That's a great question. So we actually we believe it's grown, right? Because this is what happens. The middle class or the lower middle class, those are the people that are leaving because they can't afford Miami-Dade County anymore, right? And so, yeah, you'll have an influx of more affluent, right, higher income level individuals coming from California or from New York or Chicago. But the increase that we're seeing, the real increase that we're seeing here in Hialeah are folks from other countries. And these are folks, either they're coming illegally or whatever the case is, but they're individuals that, in other words, can't really afford market rent. And I'm giving you this example, right? So in Hialeah, when you get folks that come from Cuba, let's say either crossing the border or whatever the case is, they come to Hialeah because chances are they know someone in Hialeah, right? They can't afford to pay the rent on a new product because they can't afford market, right? So what happens organically is a black market housing commodity.
For efficiencies and renting rooms.
Illegal efficiencies. We had this issue with travel trailers, right? Recreational vehicles, RVs, right? Where, again, my people, they get very innovative, right? And they decide that in their backyard, they want to put maybe 1, 2, 3 trailers, right? And rent them out. And that's a problem, right? It's a problem, again, pressure and infrastructure, public safety, right? Health hazards. And then at the end of the day, you're creating a trailer park in the
Yeah.
middle of a single family residential community. So that's what we're seeing, right? I actually passed an ordinance to prevent that, right? And so we've been enforcing it. But again, that was a great question, right? Yes, there are a lot of folks coming into Miami-Dade County, but at the same time, even at a greater rate, homeowners or people that have lived here for a long time are leaving because they can't afford it. But it are folks from different countries that are meeting that gap.
Yeah. Another thing that I've heard recently also is that as property values go up, the property taxes have gotten higher. But it's very similar. It's almost the same infrastructure. So I mean, why aren't and for the homesteads, it's not the case because you have a cap here in the state of Florida and I think in Miami-Dade County. But for investors or for commercial businesses, rates have increased a lot more than the expenses for the county or the city. What do you have to say about that as far as like where's the funds going?
Yeah, so that's always been a topic of discussion, right? In Hialeah, for example, we've never increased the millage rate. I would say probably in the last 13 years, right? And it's very important to understand that, right? Property taxes are increased one of two ways, right? Either on the government side is what we control is the millage rate, and then it's property value. Right? So we also have to understand that, yes, as property value goes up, you tend to pay a little more in property taxes, but you got to also understand that the cost of services have also gone up, right? So you look at a place like Hialeah, very different from Doral, obviously in many ways, but most importantly that I want to highlight is Doral doesn't offer the amount of services that Hialeah offers. As a matter of fact, I'll go even further. No other municipality in Miami-Dade County offers the same amount of services that Hialeah offers, including the city of Miami. We have our police department. We have a fire department. We have our own water and sewer department, right? Public solid waste, you name it. All that comes with a cost. So the question that we've always asked our residents, right, is, we're not increasing the millage, so from the government side, we're not increasing taxes. Now, we understand that property values have gone up, and so the burden is put on you because you have to pay those additional taxes. The question is, do we want to then remove services, right? So then that way we can then reduce the millage rate, or do those services still mean a lot to you, right? And that is a discussion that sometimes you come at odds. We could easily reduce the millage rate, absolutely, but that's going to come with a cost, right? And that cost is, do we fire police officers? Do we fire firefighters? Do we stop certain pickup trash routes, right? I mean, those are real conversations that we need to have as a community.
Right, but you're saying it wasn't sustainable pre-pandemic before prices went up. I mean, you had a fire department and a police department before property values increased. Property values have increased. There's again, I don't know how much revenue because I don't know how many individuals have homesteads. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how much the budget has grown. But I mean, you shouldn't have to fire people. I would imagine you don't have to hire that many new policemen. If the population is growing, then you want to keep a certain ratio, But what services are you referring to as far as that are unique to Hialeah that are not unique to, let's say, Doral?
Yeah, so for example, our fire department, Doral does not have a fire department, and that's actually a great question. Every year we have to understand something. A municipality employs hundreds, if not thousands of people, right? Every year, right, those employees receive raises, right? Whether it's merit raises, whether it's a performance raise, whatever the case is, because you have to keep your employees happy, right? Aside from those raises, which, by the way, from an operational perspective, salaries are pretty much the bulk of all of our costs. So we start there. Then you have benefits, right? And then you have pensions, and then you have healthcare, and then you have so many other things that pretty much consume the budget that make it very, very difficult, right, to either create new services or to reduce taxes. So those are things that you have to really look at. Now, I'll give you another example. our police department. We're very proud of our police department in Hialeah. I think you don't find the amount of pride, right, of your police department as you find in the city of Hialeah. Not too long ago, we gave them a historic increase in salaries, in retirement, et cetera, et cetera.
So define historic.
Well, normally it's contract language. So we gave them a 5-5-5. So a 5% increase in salary every year for 3 years, right? In the past, our police department with other administrations have been beat up, but sometimes they get nothing, sometimes they get 1%, et cetera. So that's what I mean, historic. They have never received a 5-5-5 deal ever in the history of Hialeah. After we made those changes, the greatest turnover that we have in Hialeah comes from our police department. And where do they go? They go to the county. They go to Miami Beach. They go to the places that have more money because they have better salaries and they have more services and they have better retirement, more benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So no matter what, we will never be able to compete with a Miami Beach or Miami-Dade County because we do not have that budget. We don't have that tax revenue, that base that these other places have. So what happens? We continue to throw money at a problem, but they end up leaving. And so what we've seen in the past is we end up hiring folks that maybe other departments didn't get or didn't want. We get the worst part of their career, which is the first 2 to 3 years that they're learning on the job, right? And they're making mistakes and then they leave. So what happens is now, if we were to, let's say, for this example, it's a lot more thorough, right? But on this example, if we were to say, hey, we're going to reduce the millage rate. I'm talking about only Hialeah, folks, right? There's other municipalities and other jurisdictions that you could cut a lot of fat on. But for Hialeah, right, that we're so limited, if we were to say we're going to drop the millage rate, number one, we're going to have to let folks go. And number two, the benefits and the salaries that we're offering are also going to have to go down. So could you imagine what type of workforce would we have when we talk about police officers if we were put into that predicament? So there have been other discussions in the past. Should Hialeah, for example, continue to be in the water business? Should we have our own water and sewer department, right? I believe if I was mayor, I would look at how we can allow the county to absorb our water and sewer infrastructure because it's an increased cost for no reason. At the end of the day, Miami-Dade County sells water to everybody in the county. They have a direct relationship with the consumer. Why does Hialeah have to be a third party in that relationship? And you know this very well, whenever you put a broker into a relationship, costs go up. So that's an example as to maybe Hialeah shouldn't be there anymore. Let's remove ourselves from the equation and then have water prices go down, which is, again, has been a big issue in Hialeah as well.
You guys are not a broker, right? Don't you have a water treatment plant in Hialeah?
No. So what happens is this. We are a broker, right? We buy the county, we buy the water from Miami-Dade County, and then we sell it to our consumers. That's what we do. Yeah, we have it's called the reverse osmosis water plant, and it's over on the west side of town. And that was needed for an annexation that we did a long time ago. And which, by the way, that reverse osmosis plant today is actually extremely costly to be able to pull water out from because it taps into the Floridan aquifer, which is a lot deeper than the Biscayne aquifer, which is where we get our water normally from. So that's a bad deal.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, let's move along here.
Yeah.
Today, what industry is Hialeah most known for? And what makes it unique, in your opinion, in the world of business?
So, like I mentioned before, it used to be manufacturing, right? And all that has changed. So I would venture to say that today, our commercial retail and our residential, right, is what really thrives in Hialeah. We're starting to slowly but surely increase hospitality, increase entertainment. I don't know if you've heard of Factory Town. Have you heard of Factory Town yet? So Factory Town, this is to me, I was blown away. A very big developer called Avra Jain. She's very popular here in Miami-Dade County. She owns a couple hotels, the Vagabond Hotel. And she is amazing. She has a very creative mind. She ends up purchasing 6 acres all the way on the east side of Hialeah, close to southeast, bordering unincorporated Dade. And the 6 acres contained old buildings. It was a mattress manufacturing plant a long time ago. So she just buys the land. She keeps the shell of the buildings, right? Some of them are a little destroyed. She cleaned it up. She kept the shell. She turned that space into a music festival piece of land, right? So during Art Basel or during Miami Music Week or whatever the case is, they have shows there. They have DJs. They have tremendous entertainment, artists, talent go and perform in these 6 acres of land, and it's kind of like a mini ultra, right? Is what you have there, and you look around and there's no parking, and so you ask yourself, well, wait a minute, how is this? And it gets filled with thousands and thousands of people. You ask yourself, where are people parking? Well, they're using mass transit. That type of venue, that type of attraction is forcing people to reduce the dependency on their vehicle and depend more on mass transit and public transportation, right? So that's what we're kind of seeing on the east side of Hialeah. We're trying to put more emphasis and investment in that type of industry. I'll tell you, I stayed frozen the one time when Factory Town opened up. Had a friend of mine text me at 12 o'clock at night saying, hey, I'm on my way to Hialeah. That has never happened before. Because normally it's, at 12 o'clock, you're saying, hey, I'm on my way to, Doral, or I'm on my way to, somewhere else. And that was the first time that I had heard that personally. And I'll be honest, it made me proud. It made me happy because again, now Hialeah is slowly changing and adapting to the new demographics, right? We're still keeping in mind the older generations, right? The elderly folks, which we have a lot of services and we do a lot of great things for. But now we're trying to keep up with the changes in order to remain more competitive in Miami-Dade County.
So this business, Factory Town, right?
Yeah.
You're saying it started, how long ago was this?
Probably 3 years ago.
And she bought 6 acres, and she's having these concerts in an old factory building. It used to be used for a mattress.
Yeah.
I imagine she needed to get permits.
Oh yeah, well
she was
yeah.
heavily involved with the county and everything.
Yeah. It was a long process for them. They had to get the zoning changed. They had to get certain licenses to allow them to operate right for 24 hours. And then a lot of cleanup, and then most importantly, they needed infrastructure. It was an area of town that didn't have water and sewer. They didn't even have the right electrical, so it took a long time to do. But today they have a contract with, I don't know if you're familiar with Live Nation,
Yeah.
and so Live Nation is behind this effort, and that's huge to have them here in Hialeah. Such a big deal.
And they're performing concerts throughout the year, or just kind of like a venue for Ultra?
They
like
have no
type
throughout
events?
the year. They have different events, different festivals, and then obviously for Art Basel and for Music Week and all that, and for Halloween, for example, they have it's called Hocus Pocus. So whoever's watching, you might want to go and check them out.
Yeah. I looked at the Hialeah's geographic map before this, and I didn't see that at all, but I did see this big area for a track called the Hialeah Park Casino, and I couldn't help but wonder. I was like, I've never been there. It's right here, huge. What's that about? What goes on there today?
That has tremendous history, Bruno. The Hialeah Racetrack and Casino is a staple in Hialeah. It used to be a place where presidents would come and visit. So the track used to race thoroughbreds. And so what happened with time, a lot of mistakes, a lot of issues, they had to close down the track for whatever reason. Remember, that's privately owned. So I want to be very clear with that, because some people assume that it belongs to the city. And after some time, when they were trying to reopen, they couldn't obtain the thoroughbred license anymore. And remember, in business, it's always fun and games until it comes down to money, right? And so you had other racetracks throughout the state that prevented Hialeah Racetrack from getting their license from the state. So you have Calder, you have there's another one in Broward. I forget it's what it's called, but you had all these other racetracks that were lobbying hard the legislature against allowing Hialeah Racetrack to get their license back. So when that happened, obviously the business took a blow, right? You have a beautiful racetrack with so much history, but you can't race thoroughbreds, which is the moneymaker in horse racing.
What define thoroughbreds? I'm not familiar with that.
So thoroughbred is a type of horse that's used for racing.
Like the quarter horse?
So quarter horse is separate. Quarter horse is a different type of horse. The thoroughbred runs for, and I don't know the specifics, but they could run for a mile or 2 miles, whatever the actual distance is. Quarter horses could only run a quarter of a mile,
Oh,
right? And it's a different type of horse in itself. But when the racetrack figured out that they couldn't get thoroughbreds again, which is the moneymaker for in the industry, they needed to find some other type of racing, because the law used to be back then that if you're going to have a casino, you need to have some sort of racing attached to it, right? So they went into quarter horse racing. Not a lot of money, but it was actually costing them money. But they had that just to maintain the casino. And then throughout the years, they had some very great lobbying efforts out in the state where they passed a notion called decoupling. And so with decoupling, that pretty much allowed casinos, current casinos, to operate without the racing component. So they decoupled that.
Right.
And so once that happened, the family they're called the Brunetti family. They own the racetrack. They then started trying to figure out what else to do with the racetrack. We're talking about 200 and, I mean, don't quote me on this, maybe 225 acres of land. You have some components that are protected, right? Historically protected, et cetera, et cetera. But they were trying to figure out what to do with that land. So recently, last couple of years, they actually then decided to start developing workforce housing around the track. And so that was approved. And then the idea is that on the other side of the track, which I believe it's Palm Avenue, they want to do more commercial entertainment retail. So now you're going to have workforce housing on one side of the park. You're going to have entertainment on the other side, and then you're going to have the casino right in the middle. And the great thing about that location is that it has a metro station stop right there at the casino. So a lot of good things to come with that property.
When was the last time it was revamped? I mean, I've never even heard of it. I mean, that's...
No, now if you drive by there today, and I invite you, one day you want to come and we'll have a cafecito there, you'll see that they're doing a lot of great development there. But the last time that they actually renovated the actual casino itself, which is beautiful, the architecture is amazing, was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. But now you're seeing new development on the property as well.
And the horses are no longer part of the...
The horses are no longer there. I'll share with you another fun fact. In the middle of the racetrack, there's like a group of flamingos, right? So I don't know if you've seen, but when people talk about Hialeah, they think of flamingos, right? And that's why. Because for years, I think in the 50s or in the 40s maybe, there was a gentleman that brought a group of flamingos to Hialeah. And they've been there ever since.
Wow.
Yeah. And so those are protected, and those are still there today, and we'll see them one day when you come by.
Yeah. I wish they would have replaced the horse racing with something else. I mean, the dog racing has also become illegal, but it's losing kind of its something fun about the city. You know, like I feel like more buildings get brought up, and people are living there, but there's nothing exciting about it. You know, so when you told me about that the warehouse for concerts, I said, oh, that's unique. You know.
Yeah.
I like it when from the city of Doral. You know, here's the downtown Doral, the city center. You know, you have Brickell City Center. Those are things that are exciting, that make people.
That's right.
They attract the individuals. You know, but nobody wants to go to an area that just has a bunch of residential areas.
Correct.
And commercial zoning, yeah. I mean, you can walk around the mall, but it's not really a big attraction. You know, it exists everywhere basically. You know?
And so again, and that is the whole play with that racetrack, with that property. You know, the mixed use component is a component that I'm a proponent of. It's commercial and entertainment downstairs, and then it's residential on top. Kind of how downtown Doral has. And so that's going to be the emphasis on this property. But also, I want to share, we have a very popular mall, Westland Mall. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's in Hialeah. Yeah. It's off the Palmetto and 103rd. Yeah. And we actually, that property ended up getting a new owner, an additional owner, and it's Armando Codina. Armando Codina pretty much built Doral, right? And so he's a partner there. We approved on the council probably about a year and a half ago, we approved a new concept that he wants to bring. Yes, it's more residential, but he wants to create an entertainment district within the mall as well to mirror what you guys have here in Doral. So that's going to be a very, very big thing for our community and for our residents as well. Remember, our young people in Hialeah, they leave. they leave whenever they want to go have dinner. They leave whenever they want to go watch a movie or whenever they want to do something fun. Now is the time that we're starting to see more entertainment there to keep not only our young people there, but to also have other folks from other cities coming as well.
Yeah, I agree. So if you were to start a business today, what would make Hialeah a promising place to start? I mean, what's growing there? What's happening there?
In Hialeah, you put anything in Hialeah and it works. I've seen it all. I've seen it from either an adult daycare, a health clinic, a dancing school, a cafeteria, or a restaurant. I mean, you put anything in Hialeah and it becomes very successful. For a long time, there's a Taco Bell right on 49th Street and 12th Avenue. It was shut down for a bit because of a fire, but they actually started back up. At one point, that was the highest grossing Taco Bell in the country. The Home Depot. We have a Home Depot. It's on Okeechobee and 112th when you're going to Miami Beach. There's a Home Depot there. The highest grossing Home Depot in the country. And so again, you put anything in Hialeah and it's going to work, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, some things work a little better than others. What we started seeing, for example, it's funny that you mentioned that, Cuban pizza parlors. They again, because of the high influx of Cubans coming into Hialeah, you open up any Cuban pizza place in Hialeah and it's going to be a success overnight. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, I can't think of Cubans and pizza. I'm thinking Ray's Pizza, but not no, like a.
It's a thing. It's a thing. There's a place called Palenque.
Okay.
And they started expanding outside of Hialeah. And it's a Cuban pizza. Listen, I didn't even know there was such thing as Cuban pizza until a couple of years ago, but those things are becoming very successful. Yeah.
What about any business trends? Food trucks, for example. The city of Hialeah, I'm assuming, doesn't allow them.
So it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah. I don't know because I don't know if you saw something, but so we passed an ordinance creating regulations for food trucks, right? Because back then we didn't have anything. So it was the Wild West. It was the Wild West. And it's not that we have anything against food trucks. We encourage businesses, small businesses, to come to the city of Hialeah, but you got to do things right? And so what we were seeing was before we implemented this ordinance, you had food trucks parked very odd and random places, sometimes inside residential areas, right? Which is not right at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And when they were done at the end of the night, they'd get the grease from cooking and they dump it in the sewer or in the drains. And so that's just not the way that you do things. So we created an ordinance where we set some boundaries, right? We created certain areas that we would allow for these things for these food trucks to operate. We created rules and regulations. You need to have an agreement with the property owner. You need to have a process to properly throw away any grease or any waste that you may have. Listen, and it's been a success. The food trucks are a big deal. We love them. We think it's a low-cost startup business for any individual or any entrepreneur within the city of Hialeah, and again, we've seen them be very successful. So
yeah, there's a rise in like micro entrepreneurialism. One thing that used to bring a smile to my face growing up, which I don't see them anymore. I'm assuming because of the legislation or maybe the cost. Ice cream trucks.
Oh my God!
I used to hear the ice cream truck, come by my house, and it brought a smile to my face. But I thought the other day, I said, when was the last time I saw that? Or even in Miami Beach, they don't allow, vendors to come out on the sand, for example, and serve. If you're in Cuba, I imagine, people used to go out there and offer you seafood or all kinds of things. Obviously, maybe there's some vendors there that would not have the highest standards, for food quality, and that could be a problem. But also, it makes the world exciting, when it's unique. There's people out there looking for demand, that people have. And what do you think about that? Another thing that I've seen here in Doral that you may want to mention on is leases for commercial spaces that are for like micro businesses. So a tenant will lease a space, but then they'll have little cubicles, like kind of like a barber shop, but instead for makeup, for just different kinds of businesses.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting.
I forget the name of it.
So like a ghost kitchen, is that?
So ghost kitchen is another type of, but no, ghost kitchens is more like just for delivery. People want to have They want to have cheaper food, and they don't want to have the restaurant. So therefore, and some people just don't want to cater to the retail.
Yeah.
No, this is more for, instead of having your own studio, like for makeup and doing hair and nails, you rent a small space inside a large leasehold, and you rent it for $500, $800.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And now
So
you
a
have your own,
sublease.
exactly, a sublease. But it's your own personal space, kind of like a co-working, but it's retail, So it's very interesting. I've seen a lot of them pop up here in Doral, and it's very successful,
Wow. Yeah, no, listen, I think any concept that's innovative like that continues to help the consumer, the resident, the business owner, I think it's very important to put on the table and to see if it works. Obviously there's always some limitations. Because I'll give you an example. In Hialeah, we have certain pump stations, and it's important to know this, right? You have certain pump stations that are under moratorium. So the pump station helps out with sewer, right, with water and but mainly the sewer. You have pump stations that are under moratorium from Durham in Miami-Dade County. And because of that moratorium, you have to be careful on what businesses come to the area, because there's certain businesses that might require an increase in water flow and therefore sewage, right? And if it's a business that does that, then they're not allowed. So you have to be careful in those instances, right? If I lease a space and I say that I'm a pizza parlor, but then I want to go ahead and then subdivide and then sublease different square footage to different types of uses, then I could see how it could be a problem, only if you have a moratorium, right? But aside from that, I think it's a great idea. We're focusing now also on what's called live-work zoning, right? So typically, right, when you have a business, right, that property is zoned for that business and that business alone. So technically, you shouldn't be living there. Like when you have a residential property, that's only zoned for residential, and you shouldn't really have a business operating there as well. But we want to mesh the two, right? And so we're creating. Actually, there's an application that's coming up in the next couple of months. That's going to be the first of its kind, right? Where they have retail in the bottom, so they have little stores, la tiendecita, and then upstairs they had more offices. It's an old school concept where it's a 2-story commercial building.
Kind of like Spain.
Doesn't work anymore, right? Because no one's going to go up to the second floor for. So what the guy wants to do is the units on top, he wants to convert them from offices to live workspace. So he wants to allow the photographer to have his studio there, and then in the back have his bed, right? Have his little kitchen, have that. And so that's a new concept that we're going to try. We believe it's going to be affordable as well for the tenant, and then it's going to allow them to make a little money as well.
Yeah, it's very common in Spain. I like it. I think it's very unique where they have a lot of retail stuff downstairs and their house on the top.
The retail then serves as an amenity, right? And so that's how you can pitch it as well. So I love that concept.
Yeah, even though over there the buildings are just kind of like it's their entire block. So all the properties are like perfectly
in
adjacent,
Spain?
Yeah, adjacent to each other. It makes it look nice, but it needs to be organized. I don't know how they managed to do it. I mean, it's such an old city, in Madrid and I think in Barcelona also has a lot of that. But here you could obviously plan for it.
Yeah.
Are there any specific areas or zones in Hialeah that are being prioritized for commercial revitalization or mixed-use development, or is it just kind of a little bit everywhere?
We put a lot of emphasis as well on our TODs, right? On the transit-oriented development districts. Those areas are the ones that have mass transit, right? And I've always told people, even when I ran in 2019, that the future of Hialeah was going to be on the east side of Hialeah, because that's where you have the tri-rail. That's where you have multiple metro rail stops, right? And so the idea or the concept of the TOD in Hialeah is that you create a community within mass transit. So again, furthermore, right, the idea is you offer a young professional an alternative to housing, right? So the guy that lives in Brickell, he lives there because he works there, right? Let's say that. We want to offer that person an alternative to housing. So we want to build a nice product, right? Or not us, but the private sector builds a nice product in Hialeah, right? And they're going to be paying probably a third less than what they're paying in Brickell, right? And they're only a train ride away from work, right? That is the goal. I think that's how you bring in young professionals, you bring in younger demographics, you bring in more affluent, right, individuals that could continue to contribute to the city of Hialeah. So I think those areas we're putting a lot of emphasis. We're giving more density. We're giving less parking as well, and with the benefit of mass transit.
Very cool. Let's end with this. Who is Hialeah's most influential person and company today?
That's a tough one, and it's very tough, right? But just because the date passed not too long ago, 4 days ago, April 14, 1974, we had the longest standing mayor that the city of Hialeah has ever had pass away, right? His name was Henry Mylander. Henry Mylander was mayor of Hialeah for 30 years. And he passed away April 14th, 1974. So 4 days ago was 51st anniversary, I believe, from his passing. And he really did so much for this community, completely transformed it. His impact is still felt today. Wow. And then as far as companies, man, it's very difficult because you have a lot of companies, a lot of businesses in Hialeah that have been around for 40 and 50 years, right? And I can tell you, if you're ever in Hialeah, go check out a restaurant. It's called Chico's Cafe. And so if you want like authentic Cuban food with great cafecito at the end, you got to go see that place.
Very cool. We'll do. Jesús, thank you for being here today on the Backbone of America. We've certainly enjoyed a chat. Hope to have you here shortly.
Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you.
Made in America.